Today I want to talk a little bit about Bernie Sanders and socialism, specifically his vision for democratic socialism, which he'll be laying out today in a speech at a university in the United States. And one of the excerpts we've gotten from it right now relates to the fact that Donald Trump and the other American elites, the millionaire and billionaire classes, they love the elements of socialism that they deny to working people. The guarantees of wealth, the economic planning, all the protections that they have against, suffering and against precarity and all of these sorts of things that for regular working class people and even many middle class people, they really lack access to. And this harks back to Martin Luther King Jr., who would make the argument that in America, we have socialism for the wealthy and rugged individualism for everybody else. And while I don't think that it's necessarily the best idea to refer to what Trump believes in as socialism, it's really just capitalism. And not crony capitalism. I've done a video on this before. Crony capitalism is just capitalism. Capitalism only exists as crony capitalism. So what Bernie Sanders is arguing, and I think and will argue quite effectively, is that capitalism isn't about freedom and competition and free markets and liberty for all. It is about the capture of the economy by the few at the expense of the many. Capitalism is not a system of freedom. It's not a system of markets. None of those things are inherent to capitalism. Some societies that are capitalist have elements of freedom and elements of markets and elements of competition and elements of, liberty. They do. But none of those things are inherent to capitalism. What defines capitalism is the exploitation of labor by capitalists, the extraction of profit for surplus value. That is capitalism. It can happen in a free society, or as we see, it can happen in, dictatorships like China. And what Bernie Sanders, I think, will put forward is that his vision for democratic socialism, which isn't as left-wing as my definition of democratic socialism, is about maximizing the opportunity and liberty for the masses of Americans. That socialism will succeed where capitalism has failed, and providing equality of opportunity for all Americans. And speaking to that fundamental American value. Again, it's as hypocritical as it was when it was said, and as limiting as it was when it was said, this idea that back in the 1700s, the United States was founded as a country where all men are created equal. And it didn't include women back then. And it obviously was a country with slaves. And it was a country that was murdering indigenous people by the millions, by the hundreds of thousands and millions. It didn't matter. The value held true to people. And so today, we live in a society, in Canada, but especially in the United States, where there is no equality of opportunity. There is none. On racial terms, on gender terms, on economic terms, perhaps above all, there is no equality of opportunity. And it's because capitalists, the elite, the top 1%, but even in some ways the top 5 and 10%, have hoarded both wealth and they've hoarded opportunity. And they've systematically limited the ability of children from working class and lower middle class families to have the same sorts of success that their kids will have, even when those kids from lower income backgrounds have higher levels of aptitude and effort. That's capitalism. So Bernie Sanders is railing against this system. I just want to read a couple quotes here. Bernie says here, while President Trump and his fellow oligarchs attack us for our support of democratic socialism, they don't really oppose all forms of socialism. They may hate democratic socialism because it benefits working people, but they absolutely love corporate socialism that enriches Trump and other billionaires. So that's a key quote. And that's important for so many reasons. One of the biggest reasons that's important is because it ties into this notion that corporate welfare is endemic. It is massive. And this has long been an issue. One of my colleagues and I, Roberta Lexier, she's a great historian at a university in Calgary, Alberta. She's written about this. I've written about this. The idea of the corporate welfare bums. That back in the 1970s, the new right was starting to rise, and they were attacking people who got social assistance, who got unemployment insurance and welfare and disability payments, calling them leeches and and welfare queens and that sort of derogatory, sometimes racist language. But David Lewis said, the people we aid on social assistance almost always need it. And in many ways, there are more people who need things but don't get the help they need. But on the other hand, we give away billions of dollars, billions and billions of dollars, away to some of Canada's largest and most profitable corporations. And we lose public accountability about what to do with our taxpayer dollars because we hand it over to private hands, often with few or no strings attached about what they'll do with that money. That's welfare in a corporate sense. It's not socialism, but it's an example of how capitalism will use, redistribution to not improve our metrics of equality, but to worsen them. Not to make our society more equal, but to make it more unequal. Not to improve competition under the belief that that can actually improve society. I'm skeptical. But actually to close off competition and help the biggest corporations and the richest people pull up the ladder in front of them. And what's key here, in my view, is that Bernie Sanders, he's harking back to some major American figures. He harked back to Martin Luther King Jr., who basically made this argument many, many years ago now. But beyond that, he's going to make in this speech, the reporting I've seen from it, he's going to say that socialism is about enhancing freedom. And he harks on Franklin Delano Roosevelt's speech in the 1940s, just before the end of the Second World War, where President Roosevelt said, the United States was founded on these basic freedoms of speech and assembly and religion and all of those sorts of freedoms. And those served America well for a time. But in the 20th century, in the 1900s, new freedoms were needed. Freedoms that improved access to education and jobs and healthcare and food and shelter and all of those sorts of things that a human needs to be free. As FDR would say, necessitous men, they're not free men. And so you need a democratic socialist infrastructure to society. You need to take essentials outside of the market. You need to take essentials outside of the profit motive if you want a free and equal society. So I'm excited. Bernie Sanders' vision for socialism, it won't be enough for all of us. But it is the introduction of what socialism can mean to people in the here and now. He is selling a vision that has not even been possible in 40, 50 years. And in so doing, he's raising a new generation of people who are willing and able to transform our economy. And for that, Bernie Sanders is a true revolutionary. I'm glad to see it. So guys, thanks for stopping by. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Helps to spread the message. Helps to let people know that socialism isn't all about control and capitalism about freedom. In many ways, socialism is the most purest form of liberty, and capitalism is the control of the masses for the profits and privilege and power of a very well-connected and narrow elite. People need to understand that message, something that hasn't been possible to explain to people since the 1970s, if not a little bit earlier, and we see Bernie Sanders bringing that message back, and we gotta support him when he does it. And if you can, I would appreciate your support on Patreon. Supporting me there helps to improve the quality and quantity of content on this channel, but it also helps to build a progressive voice and a progressive space here on YouTube, which, as many of you know, is utterly dominated by far-right and alt-right voices, especially when it comes to talking about politics and my main content, which is talking about Canadian politics. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this. I'll see you next time. Have a great one.